Lindsay Leigh. Wow, what a pleasure. What a pleasure speaking to this woman. I opened up with the question is, how does one work with their angels, their ancestors, their guides? She is, I was going to say intuitive, but she does energizing healing. She does readings. She's tapped into this psychic gift that she's been given as a child. She's got these stories in the youth, as a youth, and having these terrible kind of demons, didn't know what to do with it. She was in the corporate world later. She pushed it all the way to do what she's doing now. She helps people to go on this journey and to do the inner work and to be open to the energy that's around us. We talk about the 5 truths that changed her life. Inner work is the work. Triggers are a gift. And then the 3, 4, and 5 are incredible as well. But just the way that this gift has come to her and the way that she shows others to respond to it, to see the energy that's there and what to do with it and to work on themselves before they can work out. It was just outside of themselves, overcoming fear. Why work with the subconscious? I wonder if you ever ask that. I know I do. I've had the great privilege to talk to, empaths and other people at HSPs, right? And it's been great. And Lindsay Leigh is fantastic. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I continue to learn a lot, and I stay curious. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Pre-chatter, Lindsay Leigh, such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for your time today. How does one work with their angels, ancestors, their guides?
Oh man. Yeah, I love how you start right out the gate with the big questions. It's not something that you even have to intentionally do because they're always there. It is what it is. And we become more sensitive to our guides and our angels the more we become aware of them. And so I wasn't aware of them when I was a kid, and I think back to moments where I received messages or maybe divine intervention and didn't think of it as anything other than, oh, that's interesting, or oh, that's cool. I feel really blessed and honored to have, been in this position. And the more I start to work in this space and intentionally work with my guides, intentionally work with angels and connect with them, I come to realize how they're always with us, even when we aren't necessarily fully aware of it.
Can a synonym be energy? Like when I think of angel or an ancestor, I think of someone who's passed that's related to you. But is it more like an energy? Help me understand.
I love this. So everything is energy, right? And so the connection you and I have, this conversation we're having, the emotions that we have, we're all connected to energy, even at the atomic level, right? Energy is in play in everything that we do, and angels are a type of energy, but it's how they come together. And so, for example, I'll give you like a fun kind of um, scenario. So I do this thing called channeling, or I do psychic readings. I can feel the different energy of an angel versus maybe somebody's relatives that have passed. And the
Hmm.
energy is subtle, but I can tell there's a difference in who's coming in and out. Now, that's something that I have honed and trained. I could not do
Mm.
that several years ago. This is not something that you just wake up one day and decide that this is how it's going to be. But other things have different energy. So I love that you said that. Um, but the type of energy in which they show up as, or how they portray themselves and they use the energy or work within the energy, is different. um, I hope that gave you some clarity.
Yeah, I think so, but it ties right back to your childhood where you talk about, demons in your closets and these parade of people, and you're terrified. And at one point, you said like biblical characters. I think you said something like that, and changing radio frequencies. So talk to me about that, Lindsay. That's not really a question, but it's a talk to me about.
I love how you've been doing your research on me. Because those are not the most public stories I share, so I love that. But I love going there. So yeah, when I was a child, I was terrified of the dark,
Yeah.
mostly because I did not know what I was going to see. And I had quite intense dreams. I learned now that some of them you would maybe more commonly call it night terrors. But for me, they were very real. And they weren't just, you know, how do I say this? Like, it wasn't just a dream. Like, I would be conscious and see these things and not really know what to do. I used to have dreams and dream of the future. I used to just have all a lot of these gifts I didn't know what to do with. And a lot of them came from a place of fear because, uh, lower energies really like shiny things. And I think that's why sometimes with kids who are, have a difficult time sleeping alone or being in the dark, are
Hmm.
probably very sensitive as well. And I deeply resonate with that. And so when I was a kid, it just became so overwhelming that I decided, and I think I saw on Oprah one day, because I'm a child of Oprah, latchkey kid. I saw one day you could turn it off. And so I told my little myself that, when I was probably in fifth grade, I'm going to turn this off. Like, I'm done. I don't want this anymore. And so eventually it all started to go away. Now,
Wow.
the story with the four men at the end of my bed and biblical clothing, that happened when I had my spiritual awakening in 2017, and all of these gifts started coming back.
Hmm.
Um, and and I started seeing things again. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing four men in biblical style clothing at the end of my bed. And I screamed. I just remember screaming and going, no, no, no. And I grabbed the lamp, turned it on, and ran into the bathroom. And I just started crying because I didn't know what it was. Like, nobody
Hmm.
teaches you these things. Nobody
Hmm.
tells you, like, is this good? Is this bad? What does this mean? I don't know anything. And I was just like, I have got to find a way as an adult now to really understand what I'm experiencing and really move out of fear and
Hmm.
more into empowerment and understanding. And so that kind of began my journey and led me to where I am today.
So when you had these night terrors, as you call them, before the age of 10, was this the beginning of you opening this extra sense to see these things, and then you shut it off, which slowed it down?
Yeah, and it's so funny because you don't even know it's a gift because it's just always been with you. Like playing with electromagnetic waves and frequencies, you're like, this is fun. Okay. Or like, I can see these things. Okay. And no one's really taught you anything beyond that. So you just keep telling yourself, like, just ignore it, just ignore it.
Mm.
Like, keep trying to like live your life. And that's what I think a lot of us do is we ignore a lot of these maybe extrasensory type of experiences we've had because if we choose to believe that maybe what's just in front of us isn't the only story that's there, it requires you to completely change the way that you look at the world. Your lens has to completely, I mean, everything kind of goes out the window when you decide that you're going to believe in something outside of what you see with, your own two eyes.
Do we all have psychic gifts?
So I used to believe like everybody can do what I can do, anybody can, and you can. I believe that at some level, we all have these psychic or extrasensory or intuitive gifts at some level.
Mm.
And we choose how deep we want to dive into that pool.
I always knew that I was going to have daughters. I
Uh-huh.
went to live with my mother. I was with the women in my mother's church a lot when I was young. I was just a lot of women in my life, and I always knew I was going to have daughters. Is this intuitive? Is this an example, or is it just a hunch? What's the
How
difference?
Yeah, tell me how you knew. Like what in you knew?
I just always saw myself as a father of daughters when I started thinking of having children. I just saw daughters. I never saw sons. And then first pregnancy, my she had a daughter, and we had a second daughter, and that was it. I just knew.
So there was no like prior context. You weren't like, okay, science is showing this, or in my family we only have daughters.
No.
That could be an intuitive ping for you, because intuition doesn't necessarily hinge on the idea that uh, it makes sense in our normal world. Like it's a lot of times can come through us in different ways. Our intuition communicates with us in a variety of different ways, and your deep knowing is an example of a way our intuition can communicate with us.
I like how you mentioned science, because then, yeah, I derived a conclusion based on some factors, like you said, family or whatever, but that wasn't the case. So, give me some other examples how that kind of intuition manifests with you.
Yeah, I so there are different ways that I receive intuitive information. One, I'll get messages. It's not so much usually when we talk about clear audience, this hearing idea, sometimes people think like, oh, you must be hearing all these voices. How do you turn it off?
Mm, mm.
It's not necessarily that. It really comes from like within, and the voices sound like my own. And I could definitely tell you, as somebody who is trained, I had to realize the difference. It took me time to like discern. And also, I've been able to validate it through all the different readings. Again, I'm a former researcher, so I don't I don't come from a place of always doing just spiritual woo stuff. I actually come
Right.
from the corporate world. I used to do
Yes.
research, consulting, like to even be here. I remember I used to live in Austin. Even my friends are like, "What do you do?
Mm.
What is this?" Because my journey was a very private one for a long time. But yeah, so I hear things now that comes up a lot of times when I'm looking for specific messages or I'm doing readings for other people. I also will see images. So I point to here because this is sort of where we traditionally between your eyes think about the third eye. So sometimes when I close my eyes, I'll see images come through to help give me some context. And I also get the deep knowing. A lot of times it's just so clear and true, and you know it to be true in every part of your being. And somebody says, well, how do you know it's true? I just know. I can't explain it to you. And there is nothing in the world right now that gives me that data that says this is why it's true. I just know the information I have is true, and a lot of times I'll get it quickly. Like it comes through and then it's gone. That's another way I can kind of discern a little bit more is if it comes through really quickly. But it's not always the case. But it's a good place for people to start when you're trying to discern, is this my intuition? Or is this really me just wanting something to happen?
Mhm. Yeah, has it ever been wrong?
I think there's always an opportunity. So I'm going to get a little out there with you on this. One of the things I tell my clients is when we talk about future predicting, I always caveat it with we all have free will. You can make choices, and your destiny or your timeline is not always set in stone.
Hmm.
So I can give you information, and it has been correct very many times, but it also may not be because it's not aligned for you anymore. You may be moving through a process or a phase in your life that you move through quicker, and you don't need to experience certain things anymore to help support you and help you learn. You may have just like jumped over that life lesson, and you're moving on to something else.
Mm.
So that's one of the things. Yes, you can absolutely be wrong. And I think that's part of the journey is, you know, trying to continue to find that clarity as you keep going down this road, this life, this journey is, okay, maybe that didn't happen, or maybe this wasn't aligned for me. But what, and I love it because your world is so rooted in like personal development and discipline, and allowing yourself to fail and make mistakes and then get up and say, okay, well, what did I learn from this? And how can I then move forward? So that was a
Hmm.
very long-winded way of saying, yes, we all make mistakes. And yes, I'm wrong sometimes. And there's always something to learn that can help you become even more, uh, you know, aware, or learn even something brand new through the adversity or through the quote unquote being wrong about something.
And Lindsay, how I don't want to use the word trivial, but could it be the, buy this orange, not that orange when you're at the store, or could it be something like, discontinue this relationship with this friend? I mean, how deep does it go?
100%. And actually my students, when I teach like new, when I'm teaching new intuition techniques, that's one of the first things we learn is I'll teach them a yes no approach to help them to practice using something as simple as that. And I always tell them, I tell two things. I say write it down so
Hmm.
you can validate it to see if you're right. And two, start practicing with these small things, so there's not like a big you're not losing out too much. But yeah, even my spiritual friends, we joke around and they'll text me and be like, can I ask you a yes no question?
Hmm.
About silly things. But yeah, it can be what I even have friends who will do something like, is like say you have two pieces of fruit and you want to choose which one is going to be most nourishing to my body right now. And you can choose which one
Wow.
will be more nourishing, or like, I think you're Italian, like wine. Is this wine going to be in my highest alignment right now? And you can use your intuitive gifts to play. So there are really, fun and like low barrier ways to start practicing with your intuition, that can help you start to test it out. So you can start to feel when the answers are right and when you're receiving your intuitive information.
And is it necessary for every decision? Maybe it'll eventually turn into a crutch. I mean, when you want something to be done quickly, or you want to decide what to order at the restaurant or which wine to order, like something like that, do they have to sit back and try to reach into their intuitive self, or do they just use a hunch or whatever they're feeling? I mean, how deep does it go?
Yeah, I love that. So the more you start practicing with it, the less you have to even do that sort of
Uh,
stuff.
uh,
Because you kind of already know, you start to feel in your body, and you start to like understand how your intuition works, or how to start making decisions that feel better for you. And you start to trust yourself more. That's one of the biggest things I teach too, is the ability to trust yourself. We second guess ourselves so much. And these
mm.
are small tools to help give us that more confidence to start trusting our decisions and start trusting what we're doing, where we're going to go and where the directions we want to go.
Now, Lindsay, what if some of these thoughts are negative?
I like to teach that negativity is rooted in fear and is typically not associated with your intuition,
Uh,
because intuition, just like angels and our guides, are naturally higher frequency. They're high energy, like they're associated with love, which is the highest frequency. When you have negative thoughts, negative self-talk, that's not your soul, that's not your intuition, that's not higher self information. That's usually ego, fear, and yeah, negativity or lower frequency energies.
do they have to resist? I mean, what if a person just has kind of negative inclination, or they have deep fear, or they have deep, shame? Do they have to resist kind of negativity? I'm so it's so foreign to me. I keep I just try to liken it. I don't. Was it
I
like the
love it.
Force, like in like, you know what I mean? Is it like the? I just saw something about Star Wars recently. So is it so? I mean, how can they? How is it manifested, and how can it be controlled and tamed in a positive direction?
Yeah, so that is like one of the great paradoxes, is as humans, we want to control things. I
Mm.
am an A-type control freak overachiever. I come from
Mm.
that world. Like, I
Yes.
can't tell you how difficult some of this stuff. Like, if you would have seen me years
Mm.
ago working with my first mentor, the level of anxiety that I had, because I didn't want to mess up. I didn't think I could really do any of this, but I needed to figure out why I was seeing these things and experiencing some of these things again. And part of this journey is realizing that, and it's Star Wars is a great example because they don't control the force flows through them.
Yeah, I guess so.
And
Yeah.
that's yeah, and so that is how a lot of our intuition and our intuitive gifts and psychic gifts, whatever, energy work, it's about how we allow it to flow. And so part of your resistance happens because we want to control. We want, and when you go back to energetics, when we control, we constrict energy. We're not
Hmm.
letting it flow. And so there's this journey that you ultimately, when you go into the spiritual world, that you find yourself on, where you realize you have to start letting go of control in order to let the energy flow towards the direction that you, like if you're manifesting, right? Like you want it to go in the direction and you want it to come to you. But when you push, when you resist, when you hold something tightly, you then restrict and are holding the energy from moving, if that makes sense.
Wow. So yeah, you're right. You were right when you said it. I do want to control it, don't I? That's the wrong thing because it's just something that's around you that you have to kind of tap into.
Yeah, and it's not that it's wrong. I look at the world as a place of just learning. So
Mm.
there's no good, there's no bad, there's no I did this wrong. It's like you're in a place right now where like I can see so many of like these light bulbs going off like above your your head
Mm.
like
Mm.
twinkling where you're like, "Oh, this is so interesting." It's just around looking at a new way of thinking and giving yourself the grace to learn a new way of looking at your life and about how you want to be in it and how you want to experience life. We live in a world that has literally taught us to push through it. I mean, I played sports my whole life. I mean, walk it off, push through it. Like
Yeah.
we've been taught to like overcome. You must do this. When you're tired, get up and keep going. And we're learning through a lot of, I mean, think about during like the big work from home shift we made during COVID,
Mm.
how all of these people realized how burnt out they were and how the pushing through things was really detrimental to their health. And what actually they needed to be doing was figuring out what worked and what didn't. And maybe it's about working smarter and not harder, and that their gifts are actually not aligned with what they're doing. And you saw all of this,
Hmm.
all these people moving into new roles or starting their own businesses and starting their own companies and realizing that you know, maybe there's another way of approaching this that is different from what we've done in the past.
Did you play soccer?
Okay. I was a diver. I played softball. I rode horses. So I did equestrian stuff. What else did I do? Diving, softball. Did a little bit of basketball. I feel like I played
Huh.
everything. I played soccer one year. My senior year, a couple of us decided, like at the last semester, not to do any sports. I remember this is a high school though, not in college, but we did just like soccer for fun,
Hmm.
as like just like a fun girls thing to get together. And our coach would make us run, and we would look at him like, "We're done with that. We're not running anymore. Sorry."
Fascinating. I kind of saw you as a soccer player. There goes my gift.
But I did play
You
soccer,
played it,
just
yeah.
not long term.
um, we're really talking about the subconscious here. Why work with the subconscious?
Because that is where, when we talk about like how do we get to our next level, how do I improve, until you address some of these old programs, like they sit in your energy field, they sit in your subconscious, the ways we were taught of how you're supposed to make money, how you're supposed to act with people, how you're supposed to deal with business, how you're supposed to blah, all these things. And our self-talk, how maybe our parents, depending on our relationship with our parents, how they raised us or spoke to us, we internalize. And until we start getting into the subconscious to start healing some of those things, they just run on repeat,
Wow.
and they serve to be projections that we then send out into the world. But also people can feel it. So they can feel when you're projecting on them, or you're carrying around some maybe old programs that are unhelpful. It's wild. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it until I did the actual work several years ago to realize, oh, this is where like the root of our healing is clearing out some of these old unhelpful programs in our subconscious. This is the key that unlocks. It's not the doing, it's not the like pushing and like breaking down these walls. It's actually the work we have to do within ourselves that isn't always fun, that will then let everything flow and let you move into that new higher space.
Why isn't it fun to work with yourself like that?
It is not fun because you have to look at parts of, you have to start taking accountability for your actions. Maybe you didn't treat people the way that you realize you should have. Maybe you were a lot more aggressive. Maybe you took advantage of people. Maybe there was the way that you dealt with business was not really in the highest way of doing things. And now you have to go in and figure out, why is that? What part of me believed that was the way that I needed to do that? And so you then have to start taking accountability and responsibility in a way it's just not fun. It's not fun to look at ourselves and realize like, oh man, I don't love that part of myself, but now I've got to find a way to transmute that and come out on the other side a better person. And you will when you do the work. It's difficult though, because it's just hard stuff to trudge through.
Did you take accountability for yelling at that poor soccer coach for making you run?
He knew
That's a
we were
joke. That's a
kidding.
joke. That's a joke, of course. But there's not only negative things in your past, and you can trace some things up just to youth. I was 10 years old and I pulled the boy's hair or something, I mean, you can't get too hard on yourself, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, but so many of us do. Like, even I, like, there were, I mean, I love animals, and there were like animals that even when I was like 10 years old, like, I wish I would have treated better. And I remember
Uh,
I went through a phase where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like I didn't, like I love my pets now, right? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, when I was a kid, I should have been, and then you realize you're like, you exactly what you said. Oh man, and you have to go back and you're like, Lindsay, you were 10 and you were using the skills the limited amount of skills and knowledge you had at that time. And I'm so proud of you, proud of me for caring so deeply now. That says a lot. That's kind of some of the ways that you work through it, is like, how do I love myself through the parts that I don't always like or I'm not happy about. But you're right. Like, but so many of us go back to our childhood and think like, I should have been better. I should have said this differently, or I can't believe that was the last thing I said to my dad before he passed away.
mm.
We carry a lot of this grief and it really sits in our body. So but you're right. It is something that we have to like also give ourselves some grace around.
would you change anything that you've done in the past if you could?
Probably, yeah. I would probably come to this place where I'm at right now, like maybe 10 years ago.
Uh,
I
or
know I'm
maybe you
supposed to
weren't
say
ready.
like,
Maybe you
yeah,
were.
exact.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, look, honestly, no, I know exactly why I had to go through everything. I mean, well, not exact. I don't know everything about everything, but I, I, I know I had to go on this journey because it allows me to do the work I am doing today with others, and it's allowed me to come
Mm.
to a place in my life that I feel so good in. But yeah, I mean, even when I was a kid, there were things though that I wish I could have maybe brought more, that like if I would go back, and not the lessons, but just maybe like brought more joy into certain areas, or maybe not have been so serious about things, or especially in your 20s, you're always like, I feel like 20s are I always tell people, I'm like my direct reports I used to have in team and whatever, I would always be like, look, your 20s are where you like figure out where your limits are. Like, go do what you need to do, have fun, don't be hard on yourself. But like, your 20s is where you figure out where your limits are. And you'll figure that then when you get in your 30s, even 40s, you'll figure more of it out. But
That's for sure. That's for sure. Especially if I could say this, males. Women mature or younger, but men, let's stretch out to the 30s for the men. But you talk about a big decision you made. You were in the corporate world, like you've talked about. You had teams, you had reports, and you just moved away from it. I mean, it's a huge decision to do all this.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense. Again, it was one of those intuitively guided where it didn't make sense, but and not to be overly dramatic here, but like I felt like I was dying inside.
Mm,
And what made it even harder is I loved the people I worked with. Like they literally knew all the gifts I had. That my team knew what I did. They even bought me like a card deck to help me like when I had downtime to like read cards and do stuff. Like they were so supportive. That was that, and I think that's part of the lesson too, is like, are you really going to choose this? You don't like what you do and it's killing your soul and you're incredibly burnt out and you love people. Are you ready to actually leave? The universe is going to put really great people in your life to make it really hard to make the choice. And ultimately, I remember I finally had gotten COVID for the first time. I had traveled to multiple coasts back and forth over like a month. I was at a retreat one week. Like I just had no downtime. And
wow.
then at the end of it, I ended up getting COVID for like the very first time. And after, I was traveling like 3 weeks a month. So like, and I wasn't getting, and that was like during 2021, like 2022, I was traveling, like I should have, no, it was 2022. I don't think I really traveled in 2021 as much, but I mean like to finally get it like almost a year later, I was like, okay, I got the message. I'm going to leave. And like 2 days later, I went in and I gave my notice.
When you tell me this, when you say you're going to leave, you're looking up. Who are you looking to? Like, are you?
Yeah, I look up because I'm like, universe, you up there knocking
Universe.
on your door.
Ah, very.
I know, and it's so funny. Like your guides are around you. There's really
Mm,
like they don't have to be up there, but I love to look kind of like you're looking up to your guides up there. You're like, hey guys, up in heaven, or whatever.
mm. And when there's negativity, when there's doubters that come in and try to debunk or they try to demystify, they try to be negative. I mean, what do you say to that? Do you feel them as a negative energy or they're just closed energy? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, the beauty of the work this is again like a topic I could talk on for a week, but the beauty of energetics is when you become a
Energetics.
certain energy level or your frequency is a certain way or you live your life in a certain way. I don't and I will eventually like probably people listening to this, it's fine. But I've noticed how the people who are more aligned with where I'm at just continue to come into my life. And those people I used to have that were like doubters or skeptics or would want to interrogate me on the logistics of this space, I don't encounter them as much. But I will say, I don't really care that it doesn't bother
Mm,
me because I have so much evidence and so many experiences and so many clients who I've had the most insane readings with where like literally people will write words. So I had a client of mine, I've had several clients do this and they tell me later. They'll write words they want me to say in their reading. Like they're testing me and I have no idea.
huh.
And they'll write several words out and all of a sudden I'll be sharing and I'm like, I don't know why I keep saying this word over and over again. And I'm just like, okay, but it was like, I think one of the words was like freedom. And I was like, but I'm freedom, but I'm freedom. And then I have to pause and I'm like, does this make sense to you? Because I keep saying this, or they're like, I'm like, okay, cool. So I just keep going on. And like 3 months later, this client she goes, Lindsay, I wrote down words that I wanted you to say in my reading. And she said, freedom was my word for this year. It's how I wanted to feel.
Hmm.
I wanted to feel freedom. And she said, I circled every time you said my words. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this
Wow.
in the middle? But that's one simple way. But I mean, from the place of like, I had another client who her dad called her a very specific name. I didn't even know what it was, and I think it's maybe like a German name. And I was like, he keeps saying this word, and he keeps calling you this. I have no idea what this is. And she goes, oh yeah, he used to call me that when I was a kid. I was like, I don't know what that means. It was like Lidl or something like that. I can't
Hmm.
remember, but I was like, I can't tell you. But there's so many stories I have, so many predicting people's partners, seeing their partners, like being like, he's going to have a beard. He's going to be about around like 6 feet, 6'2". He's going to have blue eyes. He's going to work in this industry. Like, it's
Wow.
wild. Yeah, it's wild, the things that come through. I mean, even I do this professionally, and even I get you have to enjoy it, like, I mean, I love being surprised, and I know, like, I can do this, but it's still sometimes like, that really happened. Oh my God.
And what happens if they find that person and it eventually doesn't work out?
And it hasn't. I have a friend who I have predicted several partners, and I actually, it's so funny you asked this. So I have thought about this. I was like, how have I predicted several partners for her and they don't work out? But and she's dated other people, and I haven't seen these people come through whenever I've done readings for her. But the people I have predicted for her have been the most transformational for her in her own personal work. They've helped her see parts of herself that she's never seen. She's met, this one man that came through, saw her and supported her in a way that she's never received. So I realized, I said, I think the thread is these people who are going to have very deep impacts
Hmm.
in her life. But yeah, you're right. Like, sometimes they don't work out.
A lot of pressure there, Lindsay. I have single lady friends. I have single male friends. And, I tried once or twice and I said, okay, no more. I can't do this anymore because then you got to make a decision. You can't stop being friends with you. It's a lot of pressure. Are you a spiritual person?
Oh, absolutely.
How
I
so?
am. um I know it's so funny because people will say, like, spiritual, not religious,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I grew up in the church. I grew up in the church. I've even, the first 4 years after college, I was a teacher. I taught 2 years in a private school. But I realized that I was less um, I felt less connected to the church and more connected to these higher spiritual principles. So I learn a lot about, that personal growth, personal development. I'm working with the ideas of, angel, like, what are angels? How do they come in? What are these higher principles that we can teach, like Buddhism? I've I'm starting to find myself being called to start learning, and here I am sharing this publicly. I'm a kind of an open book when you start talking to me. But
Good.
about Tibetan mysticism, that came through, but I know nothing about it, but I feel called to maybe start diving into that. And so there are just these different, and that's what the journey is about. This year I may focus on one thing, and next year I may be guided to explore something totally new. And that's kind of, when we think about spirituality, it's really akin to your personal journey. It's less about what the external is telling you to do and more about your inner journey and how it's serving your growth.
Yeah, I tend to stop asking about religion and more about spirituality because even those who feel that they're very religious, that belong to a specific church, will still talk more, talk higher, talk better, talk more about their spirituality, it would seem. Five truths that change by life, Lindsay Leigh. Inner work is the work. Triggers
Yep.
are a gift. Your soul always knows, even when you don't. Trust the journey and the wisdom of the divinity within you. Flow only happens when you let it go.
Yeah.
This was your Instagram post.
I know. I can't get over how great your research is. Ah.
Inner work is the work. So we're talking about the subconscious there.
Yep. And it's that, and even the spiritual practice that I was speaking of, it's like, what is our inner journey that we're going on? How do we stop becoming so stuck or pessimistic or resistant or angry? I mean, I was someone, which I don't come across now, but like incredibly angry. Like,
Really?
you wanted to see me, if you triggered me, I could just like run. I had so much fire in me because I had not dealt with the things that were triggering me and making me so angry. And my emotions, the way that I felt seen, was by being angry. Like, how do I make people hear me and see me when I'm hurt? And I realized it was through me, like, being big and animated and angry. And I had to really figure out what that was all about, and I didn't want to feel that way anymore. And so that's why the inner work is such a key. That's why, and that's why, like, a lot of my one-on-one clients, they come in and they're like, I want to learn how to do this and this, and I want to. And almost all the time, by the time we get to like the second session, they realize they want to put everything on hold and they want to start doing their inner work,
Mm.
because they know that everything becomes easier and things flow when we can start addressing some of those unhelpful patterns or the anger inside that we just don't want to feel anymore.
Yeah, before you can love someone, you have to love yourself, right? And you talk about your
Exactly.
how supportive your parents were, and so you had this anger, and it was all because of this, what you had inside. You just talk about triggers. Your second point there, they're a gift. I know that when I stumble upon one of mine, purely accidentally, right? I'll be with a friend and something will happen. I say, why did I get angry? So I sit there and I try to figure it out. I'm not an angry person. And why did I get so pissed? And then we work back. And when we can discover that with friends, it's a wonderful gift.
Yes, and it is, and then you can and I always tell people too, the first step to healing is the awareness. And so what you did is exactly how you heal those parts where you get triggered. And sometimes you don't even know what they are
Right.
until you get the trigger. So that's why they're gifts, because now you're like, "Oh, I need to bring awareness to what's going on. Like, what is this?" And you start, like you said, you start working backwards, and you realize, like, one of my things professionally was I would see people be able to react like super calm on certain situations, and for me, I would just be like very annoyed, or I
Mm.
would be a little too direct. And I was like, why would I act like, why? I see them and they're able to like be super chill about it, and I'm over here being a little sassy, and what's going on? And what I realized was, in order for me to get attention when I was a kid or to set boundaries, me just saying no wasn't okay. It was, I'm done, I'm tired, I can't do this anymore. I
Uh,
had to really like outwardly like let you know, like, in a big way. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And it took me years to come to that conclusion. And I realized, I'm like, "Oh my gosh," because the only time I felt like I could really like establish boundaries or really put down that no was I had to be dramatic about it. And that was a game changer. And now I realize where it comes from, and I've been able to move through that. But it was just this light bulb moment.
I recently had a discussion with a friend within the last few months where they wanted to know certain things, and I just didn't want to tell them. I forget how trivial it was. And then weeks had passed, and we talked about it, and I finally figured out that's what my father constantly did with me. If he didn't feel like I didn't need to know it, he wouldn't tell me. I'd have to kind of go find it. He kind of gave me if you really want to know that, find out yourself. And I mean, that's when I was a child, some 70 years ago, or however old. Yeah. But when you realize those things, it makes all the difference. Your soul always knows, even when you don't. So what's the difference there?
You know those moments when you're like, or like, you want that the person that you wanted to marry got away,
Mm,
or the job you wanted just didn't happen, or the things, I think of it as the things that got away that you wanted so deeply but you couldn't figure out why they didn't work out, and then years later you realize, oh, I didn't either realize I really didn't need
mm,
that, or there was something bigger for me on the other side, but I consciously like wasn't tapped into that. But your soul, so I believe that when we incarnate on earth, that our soul has lessons and a plan for how we're going to learn these lessons. It's not all set in stone, but there are some things you're going to encounter to help you learn and evolve and grow in that space. And those are those instances where our soul says, not right now, you're not ready for this, but you are ready for these other things, and
mm.
I'm going to let these things fall away so that you can really lean into the lesson right now, or lean into this experience. And maybe later down the road, you're ready for it. I mean, I have experiences now too where I'm like, oh, I get why that didn't happen to me 10 years ago, because I wouldn't have been able to handle it, like emotionally, intellectually, maybe. But now I can. Now I'm in a space where, wow, I'm so glad that didn't happen, down the road. I would have squandered it, or I would have just not let it be as amazing as it could have been because I wasn't emotionally in the space to let that happen.
And that goes right to the next one. Trust the journey and the wisdom of the divinity within you. It's fascinating, Lindsay, how you taught, you mentioned soul and you mentioned divinity and you mentioned, and spirituality, I see as a major component of your life. And I, it's this, I remember this one podcast where somebody asked you, like, what would you go back and tell your younger self or something like that? And that kind of question, I was like, I don't want to tell myself anything. You know what I mean? Just, you're going to live it. Some parts are going to suck. Some parts are going to be great, but just do it. You know what I mean? And try not to hurt anybody, but especially yourself, but it's just kind of, you're on this journey and here we are, and try to receive those gifts.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because the more work and the more things I study in this space, and we talk about letting go and letting things flow, and everybody's like, great. I love my favoritism. My clients are like, but I'm letting go. Like I am. And I'm like, do you see your hands right now? Do
That's
you
funny.
see what you're doing?
That's funny.
And so it's like a process, and there are very similar things that people go through in this process. But you're right, like, don't hurt anybody, like, go on the ride. But oh yeah, but the thing that as I study more and I read more and I'm learning, I'm reading this book on like ascended masters and this and that, and one of the biggest things that they say, which is sad for an overachiever like me, is just the biggest thing you can do in this lifetime is experience it.
Mm.
It's not about how much money you're making or if you made this right decision or whatever. It's like, how much can you fully experience this life? How much love and joy will you let yourself have in this life? Or will you instead have resistance or anger? That's why when I say, like, I go back and I wish I would have had more joy, I wish I would have just like enjoyed the ride a little
Mm,
more,
mm,
and
mm.
let things come to me instead of trying to work so hard and try and push my way up the ladder in the corporate world. I wish I would have just been like kind of having more fun and taking life a little less seriously.
You're making up for it now, Lindsay.
I am.
Yeah, you're doing just fine. And uh, astrology, does that play a role in your life?
So no, it does. So astrology is an area that you really have to learn and train in.
Yeah.
I have not learned it. I'm just like, I'm a sun, moon, and rising.
Mm,
Sometimes I know a little, and I like to know people's signs for fun. But I do not use it really in my practice, other than it just being a fun way to connect with people and kind
mm.
of see but it is something that I think is really fascinating and really interesting. But usually you need to have studied it because there's an actual kind of science to
Certainly.
it.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a lot to it. Your last lesson, flow, only happens when you let it go. So again, it's a similar theme. Flow, divinity, spirit, or soul. It's everything that surrounds us.
Mhm. And that's what everything is, energy. And if we could just have more fun, we let go of things. That's why I really encourage people to, if you want to try and practice what it feels like to let go play, go dance, go have fun.
Mm,
Let go of that was my big one. This is a big one for me, is the expectation to an outcome. You want the promotion, like we're working so hard to get to a certain place. It's really hard to tell people to let go of an expectation to an outcome because we're very goal oriented. But that is another way to practice that flow and that alignment, is not being so tied to a specific outcome. Because what if the outcome is way better than anything you could imagine? You know?
You mentioned experiences before, as I get older, and I have daughters and, birthdays or the holidays, Dad, what do you want? I always say this. I don't want any gifts. I don't want any more possessions. I've got too many. It's ridiculous. I don't need any more possessions. I want experiences. So I remember one of the greatest gift they gave me last Christmas, I think it was, is that I said, I'd like you girls to watch a movie. I call them girls. They're young women, excuse me, to watch a movie that I like that you would never watch. And they said, that'd be great. that'd be great. We watched the movie together and they loved it and it was wonderful. So it's just experiences just mean everything. Everything.
Yeah, it's so funny, you're just like my dad. I'm a girl
Uh,
family too, my dad's the same way. My dad could care less what we give him.
uh,
He is just and he says that to us too, he's like, "I just wanna be with my girls.
that's
I
right.
just wanna be with my and bless his heart, he was a football coach and a teacher, so he's,
Uh,
like, worked in a space with, like, mostly men and comes
mm,
home to girls running around makeup and hair stuff and
pinks and
yeah,
purple. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but that's no, it's so nice, but you're right. Like, especially as we get older, it's so much more meaningful to realize that the experiences are where like the greatest gifts come from.
Yeah. Yeah, they certainly are. I love to cook. I've got they love to do. We love to travel. Let's do that. Let's learn and um, stay curious. So I started my
Yes.
business about 30 years ago, Lindsay, and I was working far too much. You know what it's like, us A personality types, and before I know it, I was up to 340 pounds. I was eating too much pizza and drinking soda and staying up too late. So the doctor said to me, if you don't lose the weight, my daughter was just born, you're not going to see her graduate. So I took the next 6 7 months. I lost about 130 pounds. And people always ask me, they want the quick answer, that I don't want to do the inner work, Lindsay. And how'd you do it? How'd you do it? And my simple answer is discipline. You want to get something done, have the discipline and you'll get it done. How does discipline play a role in your life, Lindsay Leigh?
Yeah, and it's like what I was saying earlier. People think like, "Oh, you just show up and you have these gifts and you must be born with them or
Mm,
you must, be special and only you can do this." And like I tell people, I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't even know I could do this stuff until
mm,
I started taking classes and realized like, "Oh, I'm pretty good at this." I didn't even realize how good I was at this. But it was the discipline around I want it like what I love what you said. I want to stay curious and I want to see what's possible. And I'm going to keep showing up every day and learning something new. And I'm going to start applying it. And so I started practicing and I started doing my inner work because what happens is as you start to do your inner work and you clear out these old, dense programs and ways of thinking, your life starts to get a lot better.
does.
And my intuitive gifts started getting a lot better because they're naturally a higher frequency. And so it's really interesting to see people go on this journey. And I tell them over and over again, because you have to keep choosing to learn. You have to keep choosing every day, how am I going to grow in this space? And what that looks like every day is not the same, but I make a choice every day to show up and stay connected to myself and to the work that I'm doing.
Hmm. And that you feel has a theme of discipline, of being open and doing the work and being present.
Yeah. And I think it's like giving yourself some flexibility within the box of discipline, right? Like
Mm,
my day, I try to go on a walk every morning. And maybe on top of that, I'll do some journaling, I'll do some inner work, I'll do some sketching, I'll do some drawing, I'll do some channeling, whatever it is. I don't do those all in the same day, but the way that I choose to show up and where I want to spend time and put my energy into developing my craft might look different from day
hmm,
to day,
hmm.
but it's still within that theme of my own personal development and in that self discipline space.
It's fascinating when I ask people that there's so many variations of answers, and some have like this militant, response, and your definition is really, it's a box, it's a spectrum, and just being focused and being, showing restraint, and these I feel are all parts of that discipline
Do you
umbrella.
do you know why I've had to do that, create that sort of outlook?
Oh,
And I don't know if you'll relate to this, but I was so hard on myself and such an A-type overachiever, and I would be really hard on myself if I didn't show up every day or if
mm,
I missed a day or if I did that this was a way for me to still to be kinder to myself
mm.
and still feel good about moving forward. And but I agree. It's a very militant approach to be like, and some people can do it, and some people it's very
Exactly.
helpful for
Yes,
them.
yes,
For
yes.
me, in part of my self healing, I needed to give myself grace that was like, you don't have to do the same thing every day, and you're not less of a person because you didn't get to the gym 7 days this week, or you
Mm.
didn't do X the same thing every day. And so I create this box that I have flexibility within, but still helps me move forward because it was something I had to
Hmm.
do for this grace I had to give myself after coming through this really A type hardliner type of way that I looked at life.
So at that younger point, still had boundaries, but they were tighter. As you've grown, you just kind of widened them a bit.
Hmm. Yeah.
When you meet somebody for the first time, does your psychic intuition, does it kick in right away?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And I don't know if you think this, but do you ever like when you know somebody is like a psychic or they have these gifts, you're like, are they reading my mind? Do they know? Are they picking up on something? And what I'll tell you is I am too distracted to necessarily be focusing on lots of stuff because there's so much going on. Um, but you can usually, I would say, get a basic feel for people. And there are some people I've met that I'm straight up like, oh, nope, this is not my person. This is not,
Whoa.
like their energy is all like really dark or it's heavy or whatever. Um, or somebody's just got a lot going on and you're like, man, this is not the energy I want to be in right now. I need to separate myself from that. And then there's some people you meet and they're just these like bright shining stars and you like want to be in their space. So I can feel like that sometimes, and then sometimes I'm kind of oblivious because I'm too distracted talking. I'm a kind of a, if you can't tell, I'm a bit of a social butterfly when I
Certainly.
meet new people, and so I'm just interested in like getting to know them. But yeah, you can definitely feel shifts in energy with people because they bring their energy. The energy never lies. So you have an energy field and you bring it with you wherever you are, and when you're in it, you can kind of pick up on even just like I said, just basic stuff like, oh, this doesn't feel aligned. I'm not going to read into it, but I know this is just a no for me right now.
So have you rejected clients based on that?
Yes, and it's very rare that I even encounter people like that. There's a thing where like we talk about like attracts like with
Hmm.
energy. People just won't even see my message. Like they won't connect with me at all because we're not aligned in the type of work that we're doing. So a lot of times what happens is they naturally just kind of fall away because they just their message doesn't or my message doesn't resonate with them. But I will say no if I feel like someone, going back to your theme, maybe doesn't have the self discipline to be consistent and show up doing the work that they say they want to do. That's
Hmm.
really the biggest way I will say no to people who may even have good energy, but I can tell they're not quite ready for this journey quite yet, with me, anyways.
I've had the good fortune to speak to empaths and other HSPs, high sense
Highly sensitive
people,
people.
yes. And, I've had certain things happen in my life where there's only about 3 or 4 people who I care what they think about me. Everybody else, I really don't. So, and speaking with empaths as well. So my energy is where it is. I don't really shift it along. I own a tech business, so I'm doing sales. I'm talking. So I don't have the ability to kind of shift it anywhere. So it's always there. And as I get older, I notice I have more questions than I have answers. So when you encounter somebody that has this kind of wide energy, can you resist the energy? Can you say it's coming to me, I don't want to accept it? Do you ever do anything like that?
Yeah, so you've probably heard people talk about like protecting your
Ah,
energy and
yeah.
all of those things. And sometimes that does work. What I've started realizing though is um I'll teach people how they can do like energy protection and this and that. I don't love the word
Energy
protection
protection.
because it's well, like energy protection sort of has this air of
Closed.
like fear to it,
Yeah.
like, and I always tell people, we never really want to create from fear. So if I'm teaching you how to like protect your energy and you're scared of something, you're just sealing yourself in like a little fear energy bubble. So we have to be careful around how we're protecting our energy. But I will say, and I think you do this naturally, when you feel very secure and you've done a ton of inner work, you're in a place where like nothing really, let me go back. We're going to get triggered. It doesn't matter how far along
Sure.
this journey you are, you're
Sure.
going to be triggered. But I think that once you become so whole in who you are, that you naturally need to protect your energy less because things just don't get in. You don't have the your energy
Right.
doesn't have the space for it.
Right.
It's just it doesn't compute in a way. My nerd background, does not compute with your energy field. So there is one way of, yeah, I can teach you ways to protect your energy as you're going through this. But I also think that at some point too, we naturally just don't allow that in because of the work that we've done and the place we've come to in our journey, and the wholeness that we found in ourselves, that is just very, our fields are very strong.
Mm. Got no time for drama.
Yeah.
Li- Lindsay Leigh, what motivates you?
What motivates me? Oh my gosh, so many things. I love to experience life. I love to like the travel thing, right? Like I'm about to find myself on my own adventure soon. Um
Good
and
luck.
looking forward to that, but I am so motivated just by uncovering this mystery of life and learning more about how collectively our society can continue to elevate, and what needs to I mean, I'm so interested. There's this idea, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's called like elevation of consciousness. And that's where a lot of my work comes into play. But I know that I can't support elevating collective consciousness if I'm not
Hmm.
elevating myself and doing my own work. And so I'm very motivated by the personal development, the spiritual development, and then experiencing life, like getting out there and like experiencing life, and new people and new cultures and new spaces, because it just helps me to have even that much more compassion for others and myself.
Compassion. Imagine if the world had more compassion, how better we would be.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's quite simple. How do you measure success, Lindsay?
I would have told you a couple of years ago how much income I made every month, what my bonus structure was, if I hit those targets, all that fun stuff. But for me now, it's how in alignment can I continue to stay without burning myself out?
Mm.
Like, how can I show up every day feeling fulfilled without pushing? Because I have a tendency to push myself too hard. So I'm really trying to work on finding that balance, and that rest is not a bad thing, and figuring out where that sweet spot is for me.
It's a tough because it constantly moves probably, right? You don't want complacency to happen. You don't want to get relaxed, but you still want to be challenged and moving forward.
I want to be both relaxed and challenged.
Possible. It's certainly possible. Yeah. Yeah. That's quite a goal.
I know, isn't it? But you know what? Anything's possible.
Kind of keeping that heart rate down and, blood pressure down, but still be challenged, still learn, still be curious, still advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I just don't think it has to be hard to do all of those things. And so success, I guess, is that balanced nervous system. So I would say, I was saying relax, but it's like that calm nervous system,
Mm.
and I'm still challenged and challenging myself.
Do you meditate?
I do, not every day.
Mm.
Mostly I find myself going on walks, and that's sort of my space to like disconnect. But I do meditate, and I love it as a part of my channeling practice to open up, to receive. But I do meditate, and I think it's incredibly valuable for us to quiet our minds because we are such a busy society and we have a
Mm.
lot going on.
One of the best things I like about vacation or going anywhere is just getting off the grid. Like you say, going for a walk and just separating from the technology so you can kind of quiet everything down. That's another interesting point. When you meditate, do you, are your, is your gifts open more? Are they heightened? Are they lessened?
When I was first starting this, I used to be like, when I tried to meditate, people would always say like, "Oh, I had this thing, this amazing download or this amazing thing come through." And I used to meditate and I was like, nothing happened. This is so boring. And I don't want to sit here in silence. Like, why are people experiencing these like mind blowing things? And I'm sitting here trying not to fall asleep. I would feel like, what is happening? But then that was me having an expectation of an outcome. And so then you have to go in and you're like, okay, let it go. And you're like, you're not letting go. I mean, it's this whole, like I said, we all gone through it. It's just funny because it so back to your question, sometimes things come through and
Mm,
sometimes it's just quiet. And sometimes it's a space for me to just be in the quiet and force myself not to want to do something or want to experience something and allow myself to be in the space of the unknown.
mm. The biggest obstacle I had the same, with meditation. It's separating yourself from your thoughts. So, I used to do guided meditation, and the great analogy for me was you're on a hill and you're watching traffic kind of go back and forth, and your thoughts are the cars. You're away from them, and so, you separate yourself, and I set the timer, and away I go. What is the ideal client person that you want to work with?
Oh man. It's so funny. I was thinking the other day that I just have been getting so many ideal clients.
Mm,
They're open, they're ready to do the work, and they don't have um really strict, hard and fast rules about how we're going to get there.
mm.
And they trust me to guide them on the process. Like I have a lead in my, I'll be totally honest, I have a lead in my inbox right now who um wants to work with me, but I don't think I am because they can't follow my very basic processes to get on the phone with me. They want me to do their process, and I'm like, no, like if we can't start we can't start this journey trusting my process, I don't think this is going to work uh for a long term. But it's that idea of like trusting the process, being excited and open to seeing what's on the other side of this journey together, and knowing that like they will not be the same person that they
Mm.
like. That just it has never happened. They are never the same person day one than 3, 6, 9 months down the road.
Yeah, the red flags, right? I mean, was it a little red flag? Was it a great big red flag? There's like degrees, and what do you ignore and what don't you ignore is one of life's ongoing lessons. Lindsay, thank you so much for your time. I was so excited when you accepted this. How can we get in touch with you? Anybody listening?
Yeah, so I am mostly on Instagram, and people are welcome to, direct message me there anytime. My Instagram, and will you be putting my info in the show? Okay, perfect, because I chose of course, as you can see in the
Yeah.
screen, a long and confusing name, but it's Lindsay Leigh Official is my Instagram handle, and then my website is lindsay-lee.com, and those are the two easiest places to find me, get to know me, and connect with me.
Lindsay-Leigh.
Yep.
The long way of spelling Lee. Yes. As I meant to say long. I don't know if I said wrong. The long way of spelling.
Yep.
Instagram, you've got a link tree, you've got YouTube, you've got great content on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for your time. If we're ever in the same area, maybe we can, well, you mentioned wine, maybe we'll have a glass of wine. Who knows?
Yes, I love that. Bring
Be
your
well.
daughters too.
I will. The four of us will have a great time. We'll have a great experience.
Yes.
Yes. Lindsay, you be well.
Thank you so much. You as well.
Bye now. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciplined Conversation.